Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and we are in the echo chamber known as my studio space. I promise, furniture is on the way, and soon these walls will not bounce my voice around so much like a freaking ping pong ball. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I'm still processing that this may be something that happens, a remake of my favorite game of all time. Personally, this has never happened to me before. It seems like it's happened to everyone else in the industry, but for me, I have yet to see KOTOR or Fallout 3 come back in some way, shape, or form, so, you know, this is something I'm crossing my fingers for. And I think there's a very bright future to a Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake. Just last week, I did a 2020 review for the original Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I'll have it linked down below. Please check it out. But essentially, some parts of that game, while I love it to death, I love it so much, have not aged that well. So in today's video, I want to tell you guys how if EA, and I assume Bioware Austin, do decide to remake the original Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, why that's actually a pretty good thing. So what I've got here is my celly phone, and I'm going to be going through a list I have compiled over about the last week or so as I've, spun my wheels on the topic on things that I think could make a Knights of the Old Republic remake good. We're not necessarily going to be talking about KOTOR mechanically and aspects of the game that can improve, but more so industry-wide examples on how remakes can pan out in a strong fashion despite love from the fans of the original entry. So let's start off with what I think is the king of remakes as it stands, which is Resident Evil. Resident Evil is a series that I've actually realized lately I've played every single entry except 4. I know, crazy, sad, whatever you want to call it, I apologize. But my first taste of Resident Evil 2 was not with the original, but the remake. And that got me thinking a little bit on how a KOTOR remake could lead to people experiencing that great game for the first time. While I love KOTOR a ton, a lot of the comments in my 2020 review were stating how people either can't get off Terrace or can't get all the way through the game. It just feels too old. So I think a KOTOR remake in one way can help usher in a new wave of fans. I think that's always going to be great because Star Wars is already big. It already catches enough attention, and KOTOR is so different from the rest of Star Wars that I think if they remake it, they could put some eyes on what I personally believe is the best era of Star Wars. Similar to how Resident Evil remade older entries of its franchise where I was not interested in them to these newer versions that play much better, feel much better, and they got a new fan in me now. The same could be said, it seems like, for Resident Evil 3 remake. This game also looks fantastic, and I have no idea how Capcom has this voodoo magic going on where they're able to remake Resident Evil 2 and then next year they're remaking the third one and both are fantastic looking. Like, what happened? But still, I think Capcom is a leading example of how remakes can pan out pretty well. And while we don't have our hands on Resident Evil 3 remake or the next example I'm going to bring to the table, certainly the sample work from Resident Evil 2 speaks for itself. Excellent game. I also want to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake. I gotta say, man, my hype for this game is up here. Like, I'm gonna be truthful, and it might be a hot take, but I'm a little more excited for this game right now than Cyberpunk. And maybe it's because Cyberpunk is a ways away, but I just gotta say, man, this game looks so good. Now, the reason I think that Final Fantasy VII Remake can show us what a KOTOR remake could be like is because you can already see in the trailers for the Final Fantasy VII Remake that it's retaining a lot of the older stuff that we've come to expect from Final Fantasy VII, like Cloud's cross-dressing scene. We see the combat being a blend of action as well as the old tactical style for Final Fantasy VII. So there's a lot of things that have been retained, but also in the trailer, we've seen things in the story that have changed, new story liberations. And I do wonder if KOTOR could essentially benefit from that stuff. And it's a tough objective to tackle for a developer, right? You have something like Final Fantasy VII, arguably the most popular JRPG of all time, really, when you think about it. And changing anything with that game has to be very daunting. But you have to believe in yourself as a creator, as a visionary, to say, like, wait, we can actually improve this story. Maybe if we truncate certain parts of the pacing, or in the case of Final Fantasy VII, they plan to just open up Midgar for exploration and really let us dive into that part of the game before leaving Midgar and going out into the open world, so to speak, which I imagine would be in the second episode of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And while some have taken issue with the way that Square Enix has structured the Final Fantasy VII Remake, because it is episodic in nature, each episode is going to be the length of a full video game. And I personally like the idea of having focused parts of the Final Fantasy VII Remake that allow me to explore parts of the game that maybe didn't get as much focus in the original. And I started thinking about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic getting a remake, and I don't think that it's going to be split up as much as maybe a Final Fantasy VII remake, because Final Fantasy VII is a gigantic game when you account for everything, side content, hidden goodies, everything that's there alongside the main story. It is a huge game for its time, and to remake all that in the detail that Square Enix is using for the remake, man, I mean, I couldn't even fathom that fitting on 2-3 discs. There's just so much content. Whereas KOTOR, I started thinking of it in your planet-to-planet journey, where you're going to Manan or Tatooine, and instead of making Tatooine one narrow street that you sort of navigate through and then you lead into the Dune Sea, what if there was much more to explore in Tatooine? More streets, more quests, more of the city life. What if that was there instead? And that's what started to really excite me about a KOTOR remake. I was like, man, because technology's come so far, and KOTOR isn't created in the vein of, say, Final Fantasy VII, where it was so enormous, they really could take the base game, remake it, and expand upon a lot of extra things in there, and make it a bigger, better Knights of the Old Republic. Not only that, but accounting for naturally combat probably having to speed up a little bit. While building your character is fun, the combat and engaging with your character doesn't feel as enjoyable. Even nowadays, it's sort of mindless at times once you know the dice roll system and you know you have Master Flurry and you have a balanced weapon in your other hand. Like, it's a lot of things culminating to make it a very simple system to use. And ultimately, I think more depth could be offered to KOTOR if the game ended up being remade. One of the biggest concerns, I think, with the KOTOR remake is Bioware's handling it, right? We just talked yesterday about the Anthem overhaul. We talked about how they're not really the same Bioware they used to be. But at the same point, I gotta say this. A lot of people are really hyped for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Guilty as charged, right? I just said how hyped I was for this game. But yet, I think people are very quick to forget how long Square Enix takes to get out their video games. Look at Kingdom Hearts 3. I love my Kingdom Hearts, man. What a beautiful mess that series is. I love what I'm seeing with Final Fantasy VII Remake. This game looks great, but think of how long it took, and some of the steps Square Enix took before that. Remember when they did a PS3 tech demo, and it was the intro for Final Fantasy VII? Remade, and people thought it was a remake, but it was just a tech demo. Remember when Square Enix said they were bringing Final Fantasy VII to the PS4 and it was just the original Final Fantasy VII? Like, what a bunch of teases, man. Seriously, that had to be more agonizing than anything KOTOR related I've gone through. But the second that we started talking about the product and we saw it, immediately I think a lot of concerns for folks went away, and understandably so, because the game looks really damn good. So I'm not saying wipe from your mind the history of Bioware. Certainly they've made their missteps, and Anthem was a complete failure. But the way I look at it as a creator, I know making videos and games two totally completely different things, and making games is far harder, trust me. But just as a creative person, right? Sometimes you misstep, you go off the beaten path, and you have to have your audience guide you, right? I just recently posted on my community page, hey, viewership's down. I feel like I've lost a little bit of the focus on the channel. What have I done wrong? What have I done right? Let me know. And you guys made it loud and clear what I needed to do. Whether that ends up panning out in a lot of success, or we sort of gather up the audience and when we start moving forward together, it's about refocusing. And Bioware's moment of refocusing was Anthem not working, stepping back and going, okay, they've now decided to overhaul it, but obviously this project, this KOTOR remake, has been in development in some way, shape, or form for a decent amount of time, where I don't think an Anthem overhaul will hurt it. And ultimately, I think they're refocusing. This could be the start of a bounce back, because in video games, you can quickly become the enemy, but if you're a company and you're creating products that are designed to entertain people, all it takes is just one really good game to start a good roll. Look at Capcom, right? A company that we've discussed a lot in today's video. They did not have a good track record for a while, but all of a sudden, I would say Resident Evil 7 came out and things just started to roll for them. And suddenly you have Monster Hunter World, which is now their best-selling game in company history. The company that created Street Fighter 2, this is their best-selling game, right? There is so much success in them as of recently. Resident Evil 2 Remake was a huge success critically and commercially. And then you have Resident Evil 3 Remake coming out and looking to repeat the same thing. I mean, that's how quickly you can just get on a roll, right? It's like a hot and cold streak in sports. So that's why I feel like we don't want to count out a lot of these companies that are letting us down in some ways, because all it takes is one expansion, one DLC, one game to just get it right, refocus. As long as they're listening to their fans, I think they'll be okay. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for me. I don't think that the future of a KOTOR remake is as dark as maybe the initial discussions had suggested, or at least I'm willing to believe, right? I'm willing to buy in, I'm willing to believe, because I think ultimately getting my dream game is just that important. So I'll leave it in your capable hands. Let me know what you're thinking about this topic in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. Big thank you to the patrons who keep us afloat during less busy months. I really do appreciate it, trust me. Other than that, I'll talk to you all soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.